My name is Harlan Ellison. That's H-A-R-L-A-N. I'm a writer. Call me a science fiction writer, and I'll come to your house and I'll nail your pet's head to a coffee table. I'll hit you so hard your ancestors will die. I'll hit you so hard your grandmother will bleed. I'm a writer. There's no adjective in front of it. I'm just a writer. Now, here I am sitting on the Sci-Fi channel. I really love that title, Sci-Fi. It sounds like the sound of crickets. I've been asked to do the commentary. I've been asked to uplift in this corner. And usually when you get a commentator, you don't know where they come from, what they stand for. But if you recall the beginning of Citizen Kane, Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane, standing there writing against the window as the gaslight dies and the sun comes up, writing the declaration of principles of his new newspaper, what it will stand for, what it will tell you, what kind of bravery it will have. Well, I'm going to give you that so that you'll know who I am and what I stand for. I'm sort of the opposite of somebody like, say, Rush Limbaugh, who in my perception has a brain that has turned to puree of bat guano, or the various other talk show hosts who don't really tell you what they stand for. My opinions are mine own. They don't reflect the show. They don't reflect the network. Let me tell you that I will not lie to you. At least I will try not to lie to you. Now, if I do and I don't know that I did it and you correct me, I'm going to let you know that you told me I lied and I'll stand corrected. If I do it on purpose to lie to you and you catch me at it, I will try to convince you that I did it for your own good or possibly for national security. That one seems to have worked for a great many people. Now, if that doesn't work, I'll probably whimper and throw myself on your mercy. I'm nobody's hero. I'm as often wrong as I am right. But I work hard at what I do, and I really believe there are some people who are better than others. Yes, folks, I'm an elitist. Yes, I know you could. On television, they will not hurt you if you say, you know, God picks his nose and eats it, or if you want to overthrow violently the United States government, or you say McDonald's makes toad burgers. But heaven forfend you should say that there are some people who are better than others. But in fact, it's true. Jackie Robinson, better. Eve Curie, better. Albert Einstein, you can't convince me that Albert Einstein wasn't faster, better, quicker, smarter, and one hell of a switch hitter at either side of the plate than anybody around him at the time. I believe that we are destined for something great. I believe that when we are at our best, when we try to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, when we walk on the moon, then we are our most godlike. To quote from Teilhard de Chardin, the great philosopher, theologian, humanist, and good Christian, the task assigned to us is to climb toward the light. That's what I will try to do in these commentaries. I will try to turn you on to things you need to be turned on to. I will chivvy and harass you, and I dearly hope I will insult you. Now, they only got me for 26 weeks, so I'll probably be gone as soon as I insult the wrong people. While you got me for 26 weeks, enjoy. And if I insult you, it's probably because you deserved it. That name was Harlan Ellison.
Our resident commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 58 books, more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His film criticism has been appearing for the last 8 years in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and like our commentaries here, is called Harlan Ellison's Watching.
You know, basically, I'm an old fart. I'm 58 years old, and I'm in sight of the grave. And as the shadow deepens over me, I think back to some of the lost treasures. The lost treasures that live here in memory, here in the perfect video cassette, rather than in phosphor dot immediacy on the idiot tube and are gone forever. I think back to the wonderful books and the wonderful movies that I've seen that no one pays any attention to today because of cultural illiteracy or the fact that they've forgotten immediately. I remember when I was a kid and we would go for a ride on a Sunday afternoon, my mom and dad and I in the old Plymouth. In those days, you just went for a ride, man. You didn't go anywhere. You just went for a ride. And we would listen to the radio because they had great radio shows on. And my favorite was a show called Quiet Please, which was created by one of the great unsung heroes of fantasy fiction, a man named Willis Cooper. And the show began with the announcer, Ernest Chappell, who was one of those announcers whose voice could stop you as you went through a room and you would be mesmerized for a moment. And he would begin by saying, "Quiet, please. Quiet, please." And on this Sunday, he said a line that I have never forgotten. He said, "There is a place just 5 miles from where you now stand that no human eye has ever seen. 5 miles down." And the chill that went up my spine that Sunday afternoon is the chill I just felt. Those lost treasures and other treasures that are lost to us because of the need for gimme, 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 now, now, now. What book was written this week? What's the latest thing on TV? Are the treasures that we need to remember. I'm going to give you some of them. Look them up. This is good for your soul. Don't argue with me. When they take a convention roster of films to show, all right, we've seen The Thing from Another World a million times. We've seen The Day the Earth Stood Still a million times. We've seen Star Wars, God knows, a million times. But what about Seconds? What about that gorgeous film based on David Ely's book, shot in black and white by James Wong Howe, with, of all people, Rock Hudson? This astonishing story of a man who gets to relive his life. You've never seen it? Oh, go look up Seconds. How about Dark Crystal? The only fantasy that has worked. All the rest of them don't work. Willow, Excalibur, all the rest of them, they suck. But Dark Crystal works. What about Return to Oz that got so bad rap by all the critics? Return to Oz, it ain't Judy Garland, it ain't hip-hop, but Return to Oz is in the tradition of the original Oz books. Dune, don't sell it short. You watch years to come. It will have a vision that others will say, that was a film. Then you got Curse of the Demon, directed by Jacques Tourneur. Oh, based on M.R. James casting the runes, there are scenes in that will blow you out of your socks. If, the Lindsay Anderson movie with Malcolm McDowell. How about The Last Days of Man on Earth, based on Michael Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius stories? And The First Men on the Moon, the Ray Harryhausen film, with that wonderful Lionel Jeffries performance. Yeah, those are great films. You can get them. They're all on video cassette. And writers, don't talk to me about Lois McMaster Bujold and her writing this week. Don't talk to me about the latest Star Trek novel. I don't want to know from that. When you tell me that you've read Charles Beaumont and Walter M. Miller and Cordwainer Smith and Murray Leinster and Henry Kuttner and Richard Matheson and C.M. Cornbluth and Lee Brackett and Stanley Weinbaum and Jack Finney and Avram Davidson, many of whom are still alive, when you tell me you've read their great stuff, then and only then can you tell me about the latest Jerry Purnell military novel that was issued by Bain Books. Until that time, I'm going to look on you as an illiterate. You know, I've been thinking about farewell parties, command performances, going away performances, like the Rolling Stones. They've had, 93 farewell performances. There used to be some old guy in vaudeville, I can't think of his name right off, and it'll come to me later. He used to have a farewell concert every 3 or 4 weeks. Oh, you're going to love this. Florence Foster Jenkins, remember that name? She was a woman who used to sing in New York years and years ago. She had a voice like a seagull getting an enema. She really couldn't sing, but people loved to go to her concerts because one of the reasons was that she would come out on the stage with a basket full of roses, and she would fling them to the audience as she sang the Bell Song from Lakme. And the audience would gather them up and fling them back at her again, and then she would fling them out again. And the reason I guess I've been thinking about going away parties and farewells and that sort of thing is the death of Superman. Oh, the death of Superman. Yes, DC Comics killed Superman, and it's not as if they hadn't killed Superman before. Let me show you this. This is the current magazine, The Death of Superman. Costs $1.25 in this version. If you buy this bagged version over here, it'll cost you $2.50 for the same magazine. But at the end of it, here we see Superman being held by Lois Lane, lamenting that she will not actually get to go to bed with Superman. They haven't yet been married. And here is the fold-out, and it says, The Death of a Legend. Well, the media really went for it. They really bid on it. They really thought that DC Comics was going to kill off its biggest moneymaker. Yeah, sure. And I also believe in the Tooth Fairy, and I also believe if you're in a 747 at 30,000 feet, you're going to hit a pig. Folks, here is a comic book that I pulled out of my collection. My collection? Oh, yes, I am a comic book collector. I bought my first comic in 1939. I've been buying comics all my life. I think in many ways they're America's literature. This comic is dated December 1983, and on the cover it says, "One angry burst of superpowers, and I killed my best friend." And there's Superman lying dead. But that's not the first time, 1983. Here's an issue of the Comic Buyer's Guide Price Guide, and they did an article called The Death of Superman. Hasn't this been done before? Here is a list. Here is a list of just the ones in the 60s and 70s and 80s of the death of Superman. Folks, DC Comics killed off Superman 3 times a year. So what's all the noise? Well, the noise is hype. The noise is, let's make some money. Now, if it were 10 cents a comic, like when I bought comics, it'd be a different matter. But they're not. It's $1.25. It's $2.50. It's $5. And if you think, oh, I'm going to be a collector, and I'm going to collect this wonderful comic, and it's going to be worth money, Folks, they made up 2.5 to 3 million copies of this. If you bought 100 copies of this, 10 years from now, they're going to be less than the cover price. And if you think collecting them and putting them in these wonderful little poly bags is going to mean that you're going to make any money, remember that this are all the comics you would have to buy to get a complete run of that Doomsday set. And Doomsday, he was going to be a galactic maniac who comes and kills Superman. But the American Society for Looney Tunes, or crazy people, said, oh, no, you can't have it be a man escape from an insane asylum. That'll give a bad idea, a bad name. To who? The loonies in the loony bins? Well, now you've got 8 issues of Superman bashing Doomsday and Doomsday bashing him, and nothing else happens. It's just one big stupid fight. And you went for it, and the media went for it. My God, how gullible you are. Don't you ever learn?
A resident commentator on Sci-Fi Buzz is author Harlan Ellison. He tells us his opinions are personal and don't reflect the views of the Sci-Fi Channel or the series, but Harlan knows what he's talking about because he's written 58 books and more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns.
Let me tell you about this field, the genre of science fiction fantasy. Everybody knows everybody. It's the most incestuous crowd you ever knew. The reason is that we all know each other because we all write in the field. We all review each other. Anthologists buy stories from their friends, buy them from other writers. And so as a consequence, you always have to be on your best behavior. You can't really tell the truth about a really terrible book that someone has written because they will get very annoyed. Let me tell you a story. A very close friend of mine, a mystery writer, whose name I will not give you. You can put bamboo slivers under my fingernails. I will not give you his name. I had praised a number of his books over a number of years. I loved his work. Really, really enjoyed his books. Just before I was going to England a few years ago, he called and he said, or he wrote, and he said, I've got a new book of short stories coming out, and I'd really like to have a quote from you. And I said, well, have him send me the bound galleys. I'll take a look at them, and I'll see if I can give you a quote. And I didn't say I would. I said, I'll see if I can. I read him on the plane. That's the best place to read anything. On a plane, you're trapped. All you want to do is enjoy a book. Well, sadly, they were tired, weary, sad old stories. They were stories he'd written in the earliest days of his career, stories he'd written for Manhunt magazine and the hard-boiled detective magazines. They weren't really very good stories. So now I get to London. And the first thing I did when I got to the hotel was I sat down with my typewriter. I always travel with my typewriter. You see, I'm a writer. And I started to write him a letter. And it was a long letter. It was about 3 or 4 pages, and in the course of it, I tugged my forelock and apologized and said, this is every writer's nightmare come true. This is your friend asking you to say something kind about something that isn't worthy of kindness. I said, but if I gave you a lying, praising quotation for the book, and they put it on the book, you'd never trust me again. You'd never trust my opinion. You'd never trust me when I said, this is a wonderful book, which is what I've said about your books most of the time. And I said, I'm sorry, this time I can't give you a quote. It's not very good. Well, to this day, he's never spoken to me. He refuses my phone calls. He understands how sorry I am that I couldn't do it. He doesn't believe it. When I spoke to him finally, when I managed to get a hold of him, he said, a buddy does for a buddy what a buddy does. In other words, I'm to have no opinion. My opinion is to be bought and sold as cheaply as fish in the market. Unfortunately, that's what happened to poor Stephen King. Stephen King is a kind, good, decent man with a good heart. And he was sent book after book after book to give quotations and endorsements for the jackets and for the blurb matter, for advertising matter. And he did it. I presume he liked the books. I don't think Stephen would lie about a book. But after a while, his name became devalued. Stephen King's recommendation on a book now is of no more importance than mine. When you see mine, you will know that I have lost friends because I will not lie. I will not simply give a quotation on a book because they're a friend. We must resist this. And our friends must understand that it is the quality of the art. It is always and ever the quality of the art that recommends them. That friendship is one thing and art is another. And if I have lost the love of Piers Anthony and Jack Chalker, who is, by my lights, the best titler of stories in the business at the moment, perhaps not the best writer, but the best titler of stories, if I have lost the love of Bill Pronzini and Stephen King and people like that, because I have not been able to give them the pro forma quote and pull a little masturbation on the cover for them, they will have to understand that at some point one's ethics compel you to live in loneliness.
Sci-Fi Buzz commentator Harlan Ellison invited us over recently to meet Ditmar winner Terry Dowling. A Ditmar, by the way, is the Australian equivalent of a Hugo. Terry has won 9 of them.
Terry, how many works have you done now?
3 so far, 3 collections.
Now, am I correct that the first one, which is called Rhinoceros, which is a story cycle, was called The Work of a Brilliant Writer by Locus, the leading newspaper of the science fiction world?
They were generous.
In fact, you're being humble, because what they said was that you were as good as Cordwainer Smith, and they said, Cordwainer Smith, come again. Now, how does it feel to be a talent of remarkable quality totally ignored in America?
This is what, well, I guess what we can really talk about here is the population is larger here, so you usually pitch to the largest buying market, demographic-wise. Australians buy more books than the American population per capita. So we tend to be more difficult to read. I think that's what I'm discovering.
Are you saying that science fiction in Australia is more complex, deeper, more philosophical? Is that?
Writers like Damien Broderick, difficult writer, very idiosyncratic, very quirky, and myself, I must admit. The Americans therefore see you as, the publishers, as challenging, which is a nice way of talking about it.
Okay, well now the reason you're being interviewed by Sci-Fi Buzz is because this week your book, Rhinoceros, miraculously has been picked up by the Science Fiction Book Club.
Yes, it has.
I mean, you've done an amazing thing. A book that was not published in America in any way, in any form. They've taken it for a hardcover. So you're now over here in America. Are you gonna try and write for the American audience, or are you gonna maintain your standards and write for the audience?
I'd like to try and stay with the standard for a while that I'm keeping. I don't want to come down, because I know I can. In Australia, they analyse my work as being first-year postgrad standard of English.
Really?
Yeah, which shocked me, because I didn't think it was that hard. But it's that trend towards subliteracy. People do not read as comfortably as they used to, so you've got to water down the level of English. And boy, we lose a lot. We lose a lot. We can't use the word E-double-R. We have to say, made a mistake. You can't go around saying, I erred. People say, you erred what? So the language is becoming debased, and we're using more words to say fewer things. And I don't like doing that. I like to leave it to the reader to help me in the making, just like you do. So,
well, you're also a musician, aren't you?
And use cadence and rhythm very much. So I read a passage aloud to see how it sings. And I think that's part of the secret. I think that's part of the magic.
Our resident commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 58 books, more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His film criticism has been appearing for the last 8 years in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and like our commentaries here, is called Harlan Ellison's Watching.
Times is tough for writers. You just don't know how it is. In addition to having a steadily more illiterate audience every year, I mean, that is to say, people who don't read books, people who have forgotten the past to the extent that nostalgia becomes what they had for breakfast, we have this thing called political correctness. Now, in the world of science fiction, writers have to pay attention to what's going on around them, because science fiction is the only 100% hopeful fiction. That is to say, inherent in the form is, there will be a tomorrow. If you read a science fiction story, it says, this will happen tomorrow. Now, that's very positive. It's very pragmatic. We'll be here tomorrow. We may be unhappy. We may be all living like maggots, but we'll be here. So that means it's 100% positive. Artistic freedom, thus, becomes something that might be a little troublesome, because we deal in allegory, because we deal in the ideas that are not exactly what they are today, but they seem to be about something that we know today, and yet they're tomorrow's idea. The Jesse Helmses of the world, the Phyllis Schlaflys of the world, the Pat Buchanans of the world, the skinheads of the world find science fiction very, very, very troubling. And they want you to be politically correct. That is to say, you are not allowed to insult anyone. You can't have a character who's an unpleasant woman. You can't have an unpleasant person who has a deformity. Everybody has to be terrific. Let me tell you a story. This truly happened. A few years ago, I got a letter. I get a lot of mail. As a writer of Matters Fantastic and as a critic of the field, I get a lot of mail. And they're filled with opinions. Everybody has opinions. I have them, you have them. And we are all told from the moment we open our eyes that everyone is entitled to his or her opinion. Well, that's horsepucky, of course. We are not entitled to our opinions. We are entitled to our informed opinions. Without research, without background, without understanding, it's nothing. It's just bibble-babble. It's like a fart in a wind tunnel, folks. So I get opinions. And I get a letter one day from a guy, we'll call him Mr. Johnson, And Mr. Johnson says, "You are always writing stories in which midgets are villains." Now, footnote here. When you get one of these letters, they don't say something rational like, "In this story you did it," or "that story you did it." It's always, "You always did it." So I went back through 1,100 published stories. I found 2 stories with midgets in them. One of them was the hero. So this guy writes me and he says, "I am 3 foot tall and we don't like being called midgets. We like being called little people." Well, I thought about this letter for a while, this political correctness being a problem, and I really am concerned about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And finally I wrote him back a letter and I said, "Dear Mr. Johnson, I am 5'5". I'm a little person. You're a midget." Look, I'm a kindly sort of guy. Never an evil thought passes my mind. I was the only kid in my neighborhood in Painesville, Ohio, who didn't step on ants. I never set fire to cats. I never did any of that bad stuff. But I got to tell you something. Every time I look at these people who use computer bulletin boards, particularly in the world of science fiction, I want to do something smart, like take an Uzi and wipe them out. Lots of them, hundreds of them by the thousands. I don't know who invented these PC bulletin boards, but all they are is back fence fetching gossip things for a bunch of people who have too much time on their hands and too little intellect. Now, look, I understand there's a lot of good information is given out over bulletin boards. I understand they do a lot of good works. I understand if there's an emergency, it's a quick way to rally people. But in truth, I don't own one, you see. I don't have a PC. I use a manual typewriter. It's not that I'm a Luddite. I have all kinds of electrical and mechanical and electronic gadgets around the house, but I work with a mechanical typewriter. I work with a regular non-electric typewriter, and I like it. So I don't have a personal computer, and I don't have one of these bulletin boards. But after I've heard the kind of gossip that is circulated, after I hear the kind of stupidity and meanness of spirit that is constantly being used and constantly being sent back and forth all night long across these bulletin boards, it would be just a nice thing to take a strap and whip these people into submission. I advise you that if you have nothing better to do with your time at 3 in the morning than to sit around in front of a PC, that you leave the rest of us alone and you go out and, I don't know, see if you can find the direct lineal descendant of Jeffrey Dahmer and let him eat your face.
This is Lynette Young from Tacoma Park, Maryland. I've just read the trilogy by Laurie Herder, Obsession, Possession, and Confession. Anyone who is interested in vampire novels with a romantic twist will enjoy these.
Oh, wait, come on back for a minute. After I got done with that, the producer, who's a very, very dear man, has only one eye, but a very sweet man, says to me, "That's a little mean-spirited. You didn't tell us why these people are so bad." He said, "I'll join your cause if you can give me examples." Well, what I'm talking about here is that these people are mean-spirited themselves. We're talking about unkindness to each other. Because they're at some far place in the transcontinental web, they think they can say anything they like. They're like bullies who snipe at you from the back door, and when you get close enough to hit them in the head with a ball bat, they slam the door on you. This kind of behavior is just simply cruel. They spread terrible gossip. They spread rumors that don't matter. One idiot in New York City recently spread the rumor that somebody had sold a story to Omni that had been at Playboy and had been rejected out of hand at Playboy, and it was unreadable. Well, the story has been picked for the best American short stories. It's a perfectly good story. But this fool decided that it would be nice to bad rap the author, so he put it on the web, and people pick it up. And you hear these rumors repeated over and over again. They're like the chihuahua in the microwave thing. You know, "I put my chihuahua in the microwave. I know someone who did that, and the dog blew up." Boom! Well, we know that's craziness. We know that it's urban fantasy. We know that it's mythology. These bulletin boards provide people who are cowards, who have no integrity, with the ability to badmouth anyone they wish. And they get away with it because there's no law at the moment. What I'm saying is these people have too much time on their hands. They're kvetches. They're just yentas. They're not nice. Now you can go away. Go. I was lecturing at State University of New York in Stony Brook a few years ago. And one night late, they asked me if I would do a session at midnight. I'd been lecturing all day and having a good time in the classes. And I said, sure. I said, but anybody who comes out at midnight to hear me has got to be a damn fool. There must be better things to do at midnight. I said, but if a couple of people come, it'll be all right. As Freud said, put 2 people together, I'll teach a class. Well, midnight came, and By George, there was a full room. It was jammed to the walls. People were sitting chock-a-block. And I started talking, and I began reminiscing and ruminating and talking about this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things I said was, I'm going along, and I said, blah, 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 something or other about Dachau. And I went on a little longer, and a young woman raised her hand in this crowd. And this was a science fiction crowd. This was an audience of people who are supposed to be fairly literate and supposed to be fairly smart. And she said to me, and this was a young woman of maybe 21 years old, 20, 21, and she said, you named someone a few minutes ago. I didn't recognize that name. Who was that? And I said, a name? I don't. Which name do you mean? I mentioned a lot of names. She said, well, somebody like Dachau. And I said, Dachau? Do you mean Dachau? That's the name you didn't recognize? And she said, yes. Well, there was a gasp from the maybe 200 people sitting there. Now, to their credit, at least half of them understood. The other half were totally bewildered. And so I began getting a very strange, dawning awareness of something. And I said, how many of you here don't know who I mean when I say Dachau? And at least half, 100 people, raised their hands. And I was appalled. I was saddened and appalled. And I said, folks, Dachau was one of the most notorious, infamous Nazi death camps of World War II. Millions of people passed through there and wound up as smoke, or little bars of soap, or lampshades. Dachau is a name that should live in infamy forever. People who read science fiction should have a sense of historicity. They should have a sense of the past. They should abide by Santana's adage that those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. I said, how can you not know the name Dachau, Buchenwald, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen? How can you not know this? Well, it was, I guess, the first time that I realized we suffer from something called cultural illiteracy. And it assails the world of science fiction as much as any other genre, as much as any other world, any other milieu, any other purview. We have an increasing number of people who forget the past. That's why we have skinheads. They don't believe World War II happened. They don't know about the Vietnam War. They don't know there were 2 world wars. The only reason they might know is because they have a Roman numeral. They know 2 came after 1. And to them, the war in Vietnam is as distant as the Wars of the Roses. This is deadly for the field of science fiction, and deadly for writers. Because if writers cannot use the reference that they need to make a point, then they are going to have to write down to the audience, and the audience becomes culturally more illiterate, steadily and steadily. We have a great many writers who write television now who are base all of their knowledge on sitcoms. They don't read books anymore. New York editors who have no history of what has gone before in the field, and they sell you mediocre writers month after month, instead of reprinting Kuttner and Simak and Lee Brackett and Ward Moore and Alfred Bester. And I tell you truly, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. These are some of the major awards that are available to people in the science fiction and mystery fields. This is called the Hugo. Now, the Hugo is actually the oldest of the science fiction awards, and it's named after Hugo Gernsback, who was a very nice old gentleman who came over from, I believe, Switzerland, but I could be wrong, but somewhere near Switzerland. And he started Electrical Experimenter and radio magazines back in the 20s, and in 1926 he did the first science fiction magazine, Amazing Stories, and so it is named the Hugo for him. But it is, in fact, given by the World Science Fiction Convention. Now, here's a fact very few people know. This award was designed back in the very, very early 60s, I believe, or the late 50s, whatever it was, by a man named Ben Jason. Ben Jason. He still lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He's a very nice man. I think it's nice that his name is remembered. Now, you may wonder, why does this one have a little Jiminy Cricket on it? Well, because this is only a half award. I have won 8.5 Hugos. This half, it was originally given to the film A Boy and His Dog, which was based on my material. And I got so cranky about it, I said, hey, you gave it to the director. What about me? I wrote the damn thing. They said, okay, but we don't have any more of the rockets, which look like giant rectal suppositories. They said, we don't have one of those, but we do have this wonderful base, and we'll give you the base. And I said, and I'll take it. So that is my half Hugo. So in fact, for the record books, I've won 8.5 of those. This over here is the Nebula. Now, this was designed by the widow of James Blish, the great science fiction writer. Judith Blish designed this award originally. Now, come back this way. Don't be hesitant. Do follow. No one will hurt you. This thing that looks like you might have won it at a ring toss in a circus is actually the Edgar Allan Poe Award of the Mystery Writers of America. And it's kind of, it's a nice award. It's a wonderful award to win. I've won it twice, and I'm very pleased to have won it twice. But when I saw it, I said, gee, is that, I mean, it doesn't really look as elegant as it really should for an award that important. So when the time came for me to design an award, as it did for the Horror Writers of America, I designed this, a wonderful little haunted mansion done by Steve Kirk. Now, Steve Kirk is the guy who designed the Abominable Snowman in the Matterhorn at Disneyland, among other things. We took it, and I put the award inside. Now, this one here, this is a nifty one. You'll like this one. This one was created for the World Fantasy Convention. This is the World Fantasy Award, and it was done by the famous cartoonist and artist and writer and novelist Gahan Wilson, whose cartoons you see in Playboy all the time. Gahan Wilson did this, and it is a bust of Howard Phillips Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, done in the style of an Easter Island statue. Very mysterious, very strange, and quite lovely, quite wonderful. And this is the British Fantasy Award, very prestigious award given in England. And this is the one that's given by the video cassette industry, the Vera Award. Now, I want you to understand something. Awards are only road signs. They're only mileposts to let other people know that you have hung on a number of years, long enough to get either an award or a gold watch or whatever it is. Until they give you the Nobel, you're still learning. I'm still learning. You know, we've been doing these for a while now, and the response has been, well, to say the least, uplifting and overpowering. In fact, the Sci-Fi Channel, a division of the USA Network, has had to build a special warehouse in Secaucus, New Jersey, just to handle the overflow of your telegrams and letters, the bomb threats, all of that good stuff. But somehow I seem to have left a wrong impression among many of you. Many of you think that I'm incorruptible, that I cannot be bought. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm a critic. I'm available for purchase. I mean, you take critics like, say, Jeff Jarvis over at TV Guide, who gave this great, glowing review to Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and then bum rap Babylon 5, which is a wonderful movie. And nobody ever bothered to mention that Jeff Jarvis happens to be a friend of some of the people over at Deep Space Nine. I don't want to name any names. I certainly don't want to get into his opinions. But I'm not the kind of critic who can't be bought. In fact, I can be bought. I can be bought very easily. For instance, this genie cookie jar here. I thought I would put it on here because I promised my friend Robin that I would show it. And we have here, this is a wonderful book. This is called Spaghetti Westerns, The Good, Bad, and the Violent, published by McFarlane. They sent that to me. They hoped that I would mention it on this show. And so I'm mentioning it, and so I got to keep it, and it's about $45. But the best of all, oh, wait. Come here. I got to show you something terrific. You see this? You see this little teacup? It's just a little silver teacup, right? And over here, there's this little plate that's got this little design on it, right? They don't look like much of anything. But when you take the teacup and you put it on the plate, oh, is that hot? Now, this one's North by Northwest. They also make one with Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times. They got one with Marilyn Monroe in 7-Year Itch, and they got a great King Kong. Terrific one. They're over there, but you can't see them because they're not in the shot. Anyhow, these cost about $75 a piece. They come from France. Somebody sent them to me. They said, well, if you show it on Sci-Fi Buzz, you can keep them. And I said, you got it. I remember Sam Peckinpah, the great director. Once upon a time, somebody said, how could you direct such a lousy film as that? He said, I'm like a good whore. I go where I'm kicked. Well, folks, I too can be bought. Do not hesitate. Do not fall back. Try to buy me. For instance, look at this. This book is called Science Fiction and Fantasy Literature, 1975 to 1991. Now, this book has a listing of every science fiction writer and every fantasy writer from 1974 on to present. It's got a listing of every one of them, and it's got all their books and all the titles of their stories. In any case, I've got this wonderful book, and they sent it to me, and I said, well, I'll show it on this program. And they said, fine, you can have it. And I saved $199. Now, folks, with this kind of a job, the perks are all important. So I urge you, do not hold back. If you've got something you want hyped, if you've got something you want shown on television, send it to me. Send it to me. I can be bought. Now, I will, of course, mention that you sent it to me for this kind of promotion. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to say something good about it. I may say it's trash. But what the hell?